I stood at the front door, suitcase in hand, as my husband, whom I once nursed through a broken career and crushing debt, told me I had overstayed my usefulness. And beside him, smug and satisfied, stood my mother-in-law, Gloria, who had spent the last 3 years calling me a burden. What neither of them knew was that I had been quietly paying her medical bills every chemo session, every overnight stay, without saying a word. I used my inheritance, drained my savings, even skipped meals so she could live. And yet, here I was, discarded like rotting garbage. That night something in me snapped. My name is Lena Whitmore, and I live in Salem, Oregon. I refuse to be trampled on any longer. I never imagined that love could grow teeth sharp enough to tear you apart. It happened on a Wednesday. There was a chill in the Oregon air, not yet winter, but cold enough to numb your fingers if you stood outside long enough, just like I was clutching the handle of my worn suitcase, as if it could somehow anchor me to a life I no longer had. My husband Ethan stood in the doorway of the house I helped turn into a home, looking at me with hollow eyes and a clenched jaw as though I were a stranger, no worse, a trespasser. "You should go, Lena," he said, not meeting my gaze. "This isn't working anymore. You don't contribute. You just exist. Just exist." The words hit harder than a slap. Just a few years ago, he was broken, jobless, drowning in debt, and abandoned by the same mother who now stood smugly beside him, arms crossed and face twisted into a permanent sneer. I had been the one who fed him, found him freelance clients, stayed up late editing his portfolio. I had drained every cent of my inheritance to keep us afloat, never asking for praise, only love. Gloria, my mother-in-law, let out a theatrical sigh. "This is for the best, Ethan. She's been dead weight for years. She doesn't cook, she doesn't clean, she doesn't even have a job. What kind of woman lives off her husband like that? What kind of woman indeed?" They had no idea that while Gloria was busy telling neighbors I was lazy, I was quietly paying her hospital bills, chemo, blood work, CT scans. When her own insurance ran out and she was too proud to ask for help, I stepped in. I had stood by her hospital bed, held her hand during her lowest moments, whispered reassurances, even when she spat bitter words at me in morphine-fueled delirium. I never told her where the money came from. I never wanted thanks. But I hoped that maybe she knew, that maybe deep down she felt it. But now she looked at me like a parasite, a leech. "I just can't do this anymore," Ethan added, avoiding my eyes. "You're not the same woman I married." Of course I wasn't. The woman he married was full of hope and softness. She hadn't yet been drained dry by his mother's disdain or the weight of keeping their world from falling apart. My throat burned, but I refused to cry. "Not in front of them. I gave you everything," I whispered, "and you let her poison you against me." Gloria snorted. "Don't be dramatic. You gave us nothing but headaches. You should be grateful we let you stay this long." That was the moment something snapped. It didn't feel like rage. It felt colder, cleaner, a bone-deep stillness. I looked at Ethan, really looked, and saw not the man I once fell in love with, but the man who allowed his mother to stomp on me again and again while he stood by like a ghost. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply turned away. But as I reached the gate, suitcase wheels dragging along the gravel, I said one last thing. I didn't turn around. "You might think I'm nothing now, but you have no idea what I've done for you. For her. One day you'll know, and it'll be too late." I walked away from that house with $26 in my purse, 3 blisters on my heel, and a secret they didn't deserve to know. I was the reason Gloria was still alive. And they had just thrown me out like trash. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. They called me a parasite, but parasites don't give away everything they have for someone else's survival. For the longest time, I carried the weight of Gloria's life in quiet secrecy. I remember the first time she collapsed in the kitchen. Ethan was at work, I held her trembling hands dialing 911 while she cursed me under her breath, telling me not to touch her, that I was filthy. But when the paramedics arrived, it was me who rode beside her in the ambulance, me who answered the nurses' questions, me who waited through the endless hours in that too-cold ER while Ethan couldn't leave the office. When the doctors said the word cancer, Gloria went pale. Ethan cried. But I acted. It started with small payments. The first scan, the outpatient follow-up, then the chemotherapy. But insurance only went so far, and Gloria, prideful, stubborn, furious at aging, refused to ask for help. So I gave it quietly. I liquidated the small savings account my father left me when he passed. Then the emergency fund. Then my last freelance contract and online design job I did at night after Ethan fell asleep just so I could keep food in the fridge. The money went straight to the hospital. No one ever asked how the bills got paid. No one even thanked me. Gloria assumed it was Ethan. Ethan assumed it was some charity program. And I let them assume. I kept the receipts hidden in a shoebox behind our closet wall, not out of fear, but because I didn't want to seem self-righteous. I didn't want to say, look what I did. I wanted to be good, to be helpful, to be loved. But love built on silence and self-erasure is not love, it's servitude. Sometimes late at night, I would sit in the bathroom door locked, light dimmed, and cry as quietly as I could because the stress of watching my bank account bleed dry while still smiling for Gloria's sake. It hollowed me out. I missed meals to afford her prescriptions. I gave up my hair appointments, my clothes, even birthday gifts from Ethan. He always said we had to be frugal, never knowing I was the one bailing out his mother behind the scenes. Gloria never softened toward me. Even when her strength returned, even when the color returned to her face and her hair began to grow back in fragile, wiry curls, she still refused to acknowledge me as anything more than an inconvenience. "You're not family," she said one day when I made her soup and left it by her bed. "You're a charity case my son married. You should be thankful." I should be thankful. For what? For the roof over my head that I paid for with silent sacrifices, for the icy glares at every dinner table, for the way Ethan began to withdraw from me, slowly, subtly, like peeling paint until there was nothing but blank wall. The woman I became in that house was not the woman I used to be. I had dreams once. A small graphic design studio, a warm kitchen of my own, children, friends, maybe even a rescue dog. But over time, I learned to quiet those dreams. Because in that house, Gloria was the queen, and I was the ghost in the walls, serving, giving, erasing myself, in hopes that someone might say, "We see you." They never did, and yet I never once told Gloria I was the one paying her bills. Why? Because some part of me, foolish hopeful, believed that one day she would turn to me softened by the grace of time and healing and say thank you. That day never came. Instead, I got thrown out. And what cut deeper than the betrayal was the realization that all my sacrifices had not only gone unrecognized, but had been rewritten. In their story, I was not the silent caregiver. I was the dead weight. That night, after being cast out like trash, I sat in the back seat of my old Honda Civic parked behind a 24-hour laundromat and pulled the shoebox out of my bag. I hadn't even realized I had packed it until I unzipped the side pouch and found it there. The bills, the receipts, the appointment schedules, all with my name at the bottom. All the evidence of what I had done. I stared at them for a long time, tears silently falling onto the faded ink. And that's when something shifted. This box, once a symbol of secret generosity, now felt like a ledger of unpaid debts. They thought I was a parasite. Let them learn who fed them. Let them choke on the truth. The first night in the car was the hardest. I curled into the passenger seat of my Civic, wrapped in an old cardigan, using my purse as a pillow. The Oregon night crept into the cabin like a thief, cold, wet, unwelcome. I hadn't cried when Ethan told me to leave, and I didn't cry when Gloria called me a parasite. But I cried that night, quietly, bitterly. My breath fogged up the windows as I stared up at the ceiling and wondered how I had fallen this far. It wasn't just the cold. It was the ache of being erased. While I lay there cramped and trembling, they were probably sitting comfortably in our living room. Maybe Gloria had commandeered the couch again, barking out instructions, and Ethan, so spineless now, was following them like a dog desperate for praise. They had no idea where I was. They didn't ask. They didn't care. I used to think survival was about holding on, that if I held on long enough, endured enough, I would be rewarded with love, with peace, with respect. But now, huddled in the back seat, I realized that survival sometimes means letting go of the fantasy that they would wake up one day and see me, letting go of the need to be acknowledged, letting go of the guilt that kept me tied to a life that was slowly killing me. But I wasn't ready for revenge yet, not then. At that point, all I wanted was warmth, a shower, a safe place to sleep. I spent the next few days hopping between grocery store bathrooms and library corners, charging my phone in the wall outlets, and pretending to read while my stomach screamed from emptiness. I stretched every dollar with the precision of a surgeon dollar menu coffee in the morning, a banana for lunch, a packet of instant noodles from the gas station at night. Every night I returned to my car. I tucked the shoebox of receipts underneath the passenger seat, as if it were some kind of sacred artifact. It was sacred to me, a record of my truth in a world that had twisted me into a villain. One morning after another sleepless night, I spotted Gloria on the sidewalk while I was parked across from the pharmacy. She looked healthy, smiling. She was holding a bag of fresh prescriptions, chatting on the phone. I watched her laugh while I sat there unshowered and starving, my life falling apart in a fogged-up Civic. And that's when it hit me I wasn't just broke. I had been broken. Piece by piece, word by word, smile by fake smile. I wanted to scream, to march up to her, throw the receipts in her face and shout, "You're welcome, Gloria." But I didn't, because I realized something else, something deeper. She didn't deserve my rage, not yet. She deserved silence. Silence is powerful when it comes after generosity. It becomes a shadow that follows you until you feel it crawling over your conscience. And so I waited. But waiting didn't mean weakness. It meant rebuilding. On the fourth night, while scrolling aimlessly through my phone in a cafe parking lot, mooching off their free Wi-Fi, I saw a message buried deep in my inbox. It was from a woman named Sylvia Barron. I hadn't seen the name in years. She had once been my father's old friend from college, a woman who ran a private health foundation in Portland. The message was short. "Lena, I heard about what happened from someone in the community. If you ever need a place to stay or work, call me. Your father was the best man I ever knew. That kindness had to go somewhere." I stared at that message like it was a hallucination, like it was too late, like I didn't deserve help. But I called. The line rang twice before she answered. "Lena," she said, voice warm and steady like the sound of a fireplace. "Come, I have a guest room and a job. Don't argue." I didn't argue. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept in a warm bed. I had a towel that smelled like lavender. I ate real food. I showered until the hot water turned cold and my skin burned pink. And I wept. Not because I was sad, but because someone saw me. Someone remembered me not as the girl who stayed quiet and small, but as the daughter of a man who once mattered. And maybe, just maybe, I mattered too. The next morning, I placed the shoebox on the nightstand of Sylvia's guest room. I took out every bill, every receipt, and I laid them out like puzzle pieces. I looked at them not with sorrow anymore, but with clarity. They weren't symbols of loss. They were my proof that I had been more than they ever deserved. And now I had nothing left to lose, which meant it was time they lost something too. There are moments in life when one small kindness reignites everything you thought was lost. For me, that moment came wrapped in the warmth of a borrowed robe, a cup of hot lemon tea, and the steady voice of Sylvia Barron, my father's old friend, and as I would come to realize one of the most quietly powerful women in Oregon's health advocacy world. She didn't ask for the full story. She didn't interrogate me with pity. She simply saw me, not as a victim, not as a burden, but as someone worthy of a second chance. I remember you used to draw flowers on everything, she said one morning, smiling over her coffee. Napkins, homework, even the church newsletter. I had forgotten that part of me. The artist, the dreamer, the girl who once imagined opening her own creative studio offering design services to small businesses run by women, the elderly, the overlooked. That girl had been buried under years of neglect, dismissal, and survival mode exhaustion. But Sylvia's words were like a hand reaching down into that rubble. I could use someone like you, she added, her tone casual but laced with purpose. We've got a design role open for our hospice outreach program. The pay's not glamorous, but the work matters. Hospice. The word stung. I had spent so much time in hospitals, clinics, oncology waiting rooms, not for myself, but for Gloria. And yet, even through the pain, I knew this offer was more than just a job. It was a lifeline. I'd like that, I whispered. 3 weeks later, I was working in a quiet office with soft lighting and shelves full of paperwork that didn't belong to someone else's tragedy. For the first time in years, I had something of my own. A desk, a nameplate, an inbox that said ll.whitmore.barronfoundation.org. And more than that, a purpose. I helped families tell their stories. I designed remembrance brochures for patients transitioning into hospice care. I created memory journals, visual scrapbooks, and final letters. It was delicate work full of emotion. But it healed me as much as it helped them. Every time I saw an elderly wife hold her husband's hand in the waiting room, I remembered how Gloria had cried when she thought she wouldn't live to see her 70th birthday, and how I, her parasite, had sat beside her holding back tears of my own. Every time I listened to a daughter express guilt for not being good enough while her mother was dying, I remembered my own silence, my own unthanked sacrifices. Working there didn't erase my past, but it gave it meaning. Sylvia often left handwritten notes on my desk. Beautiful layout, your empathy shows. The Simmons family said your brochure made them cry in a good way. Your father would be proud. Those notes kept me going. And with every paycheck, I began to save again. Not just money, but pieces of myself. I bought new clothes, replaced my cracked phone screen, started sketching again during lunch breaks, even treated myself to a real haircut, not the rushed $12 ones I used to sneak in between grocery trips. But no matter how much I healed, I couldn't forget the box. That shoebox still lived in my nightstand drawer. It no longer haunted me, but it waited, patiently, like a quiet army of receipts, each one stamped with my quiet suffering, my devotion, and their ignorance. I wasn't ready to unleash it, not yet, but I wanted them to feel something, even if they didn't know it came from me. And so on a rainy Thursday morning, I walked into a print shop in downtown Salem and made copies of every single receipt. I slipped them into a plain envelope. No note, no name. On the front I wrote only this, paid in full LW. Then I mailed it to Gloria's address. I imagined the scene. Gloria checking the mail in her pink robe, grumbling about bills, opening the envelope with her usual impatience, flipping through the stack of receipts with her trembling hands, each one with a clinic logo, each one dated, each one with my initials. Would she realize? Would she recognize the hospital names, the prescription costs, the after-hours oncology transport fees? Would she remember the day she said she wished I'd just go away? And when Ethan came home and saw her crying in the kitchen, would he finally ask, who paid for all this? I didn't need them to know it was me. Not yet, but I needed the truth to start cracking through the lies they'd built their comfort upon. Because while they slept on plush mattresses in that too-big house full of smug righteousness and mother-son loyalty, I was rising, not as a ghost, not as a servant, but as a woman who had once given everything and now was learning to take everything back. Piece by piece. The silence after I mailed the envelope was deafening. Weeks passed. No calls, no emails, no sudden knocks on Sylvia's front door with tearful apologies. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but some part of me naive still, even after everything, thought the truth might shatter their delusions immediately. But when you live in denial for long enough, even a truth soaked in evidence feels like a threat. Then one morning, Sylvia placed a plain white envelope on my desk at the foundation office. "This came for you," she said. No return address. I stared at it for a long time. My name, Lena Whitmore, written in Gloria's unmistakable shaky cursive. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten letter. "I don't know what you're trying to do. Is this some kind of guilt trip? You think a bunch of receipts means you were entitled to my son, my house, my family? You paid for things you were never asked to pay for. Don't pretend you're some kind of martyr. We took you in. We gave you a home. Be grateful it lasted as long as it did. No apology, no acknowledgement, just venom disguised as justification." I read it twice, then a third time, and slowly a smile crept across my face. Because it told me everything I needed to know. She knew. She recognized the receipts. She knew I had paid for her survival. And instead of admitting guilt, she doubled down in anger. Because admitting the truth would unravel everything she told herself. To sleep at night that I was worthless, that Ethan was right to throw me out, that she had never needed me. She was rattled, scared. Good. The next day, Ethan emailed me. Subject: "Did you really pay for Mom's treatments?" It was a single sentence. That's all. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. I didn't reply. I didn't owe him closure. But a week later, I saw them again. I was walking home from the foundation when a familiar car pulled up beside the sidewalk. Gloria was in the passenger seat. Ethan stepped out looking thinner, older, like life had caught up to him all at once. He called out to me like I was an old friend, like he hadn't left me on the street with nothing but a suitcase, and a suitcase full of wounds. "Lena, wait, please." I stopped, but I didn't move closer. Gloria stayed seated. She couldn't even look me in the eye. Ethan walked up slowly, his face strained with something like regret, but it was too practiced, too rehearsed. I didn't know," he said. "About the bills, about everything. Mom never told me." "She didn't have to," I said. "You lived in that house. You knew the money didn't grow on trees. I thought it was insurance. Or maybe, I don't know, your father's old money." My laugh was bitter. It was my father's money. Every last dollar of it. And you let her convince you I was leeching off you. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "No," I said sharply. "You're not. You're just uncomfortable now that the image you painted of me is cracking." He looked down at the pavement. "She's not doing well. Her health's declining again. She's been asking for you." Now I laughed a real dry, startled laugh. Now she wants me. I think she feels guilty." "Good," I said. "She should." There was a long pause. The air between us grew heavier by the second. "We miss you," he said finally. "I miss you. You miss what I did for you, not who I am." I turned to leave, but something made me pause. I looked back at the car. Gloria's window was halfway down. She was looking at me now. Her eyes were puffy-rimmed red, but her mouth was still pursed in that stubborn way I remembered too well. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. But I knew that guilt was her new illness now, and it would grow quietly in the place where pride used to live. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. They had read the letter I never had to write, the one my silence had crafted for me, and it had hit its mark. They knew now, and nothing would ever be the same again. 2 weeks after that sidewalk encounter, they showed up at the Barron Foundation. I was at my desk halfway through designing a memorial card for a hospice patient's family when Sylvia gently knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you," she said softly. "Two, actually. I can send them away if you want." I didn't need to ask who. "No," I said. "Let them in." A moment later, Ethan walked in, his eyes darting around nervously like he didn't belong. Behind him came Gloria, thinner, paler, but still walking with that same stiff pride she had worn like armor for decades. She held a folder in her hand, shaking slightly. "Lena," Ethan began, voice trembling, "we just wanted to talk." I didn't offer them seats. Gloria's eyes scanned the room, the clean lines, the flowers on the windowsill, the framed thank you notes from families I'd helped. "This is where you work?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Yes," I replied. "Where I rebuilt my life, after you both tried to destroy it." Her face flinched. Ethan stepped forward, hands clasped tightly. "We didn't know the extent of what you did. We were wrong. I was wrong." He glanced at Gloria, urging her to speak. She hesitated. Finally, she opened the folder and pulled out the stack of receipts I'd sent. I read every single one of these. At first, I thought it was a prank or a power move, but I started remembering every appointment, every time you stood beside me when I thought I was dying. Her voice broke. "I didn't know it was you," she whispered. "I thought you were just there. You made sure I was invisible," I said quietly, "until you needed someone to carry your pain." She nodded slowly. "You saved my life, and I paid you back by turning my son against you." Ethan's face tightened with shame. "We came to say we're sorry," he said. "We know that doesn't undo what happened, but we don't want to lose you completely." I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands on the desk. "I did everything I could to be part of your family. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I gave until there was nothing left to give. And when I was empty, you discarded me." Gloria's hands began to tremble. "I've been sick again. I don't have long, they think." She looked up at me, eyes hollow. I wanted to ask if... "No," I cut in softly but firmly. "I'm not coming back." Ethan's shoulders dropped. "I'm not angry anymore," I continued. "But I'm not the woman you threw out. I'm not the one who waits for scraps of affection or begs to be seen. I built something without you. I found people who saw me not as a burden, not as a parasite, but as a person." Gloria's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to die hated." "Then maybe you should have treated people better while you had the chance." She looked like she might collapse right there, but Sylvia, ever gracious, stepped in from the doorway with a chair and gently guided her into it. "I won't stand in the way if you want to mend things," Sylvia said to me gently, "but you don't owe them your peace. You've earned that for yourself." I looked at the woman who had once spit cruel words at me from a hospital bed, who mocked my clothes, my work, my silence. Now she was small, not just sick, but stripped of power. I wasn't here to punish her, but I wasn't here to heal her either. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "both of you." Ethan exhaled. Gloria started to cry. "But that doesn't mean I forget, and it doesn't mean I return." Gloria looked up startled. You won't come visit." "I have a life now," I said. "A real one. Not one where I survive for someone else's comfort. I have purpose, friends, dignity." I stood. "This is the last conversation we'll ever have." Ethan reached for my hand. "Lena, please." I stepped back. "You made your choice the day you let her call me a parasite and threw me into the street." He nodded, defeated. Gloria stood shaky and pale. She looked around one last time. "You always were better than us," she murmured. I didn't answer. They left without another word. That night I walked to the coast, the place I used to dream about when I was sleeping in my car. I stood barefoot on the sand, wind in my hair, watching the sun sink behind the waves. And I realized something strange. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt clean. They had come to beg, but I had already moved on. I didn't attend Gloria's funeral. The invitation came in the form of a text from Ethan 2 sentences long, no warmth, no depth. Just she passed this morning. The service is Saturday if you want to come. There was a time when I would have gone. Not for her, but for the chance to prove I was bigger, better, more forgiving than the pain she dealt me. But I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Instead, I spent that Saturday morning sipping coffee on the porch of my new apartment, a little second-story place just outside Portland, with a lemon tree blooming in a pot I planted myself. I was wearing my favorite robe, barefoot, hair loose. Free. I'd used my savings to put a deposit down. The place wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every pillow, every mug, every lamp had been chosen by me, not inherited, not handed down with strings. No one sneered when I walked through the door. No one rolled their eyes when I spoke. Peace, I've learned, is not the absence of pain. It's the presence of boundaries. Gloria never apologized properly. Ethan never rebuilt what he broke. And I never returned to that house on Cedar Lane. But I did choose something else. Something stronger than revenge. I chose myself. Sylvia's foundation offered me a permanent role, and not just behind the scenes. I now lead a small creative team dedicated to end-of-life dignity for women who, like me, had been forgotten, dismissed, or silenced. We design memory journals, help them write letters to estranged families, sometimes just sit with them when they're scared. One woman, Lorraine, clutched my hand recently and said, "I've never been seen like this before." I smiled. I know the feeling. I also began volunteering at a shelter for women starting over. I never shared my full story, just little pieces enough to show them that healing is real, that survival is not the end, but the beginning. Sometimes I wonder what Ethan tells people now. If he still paints me as the parasite, or if he's finally learned to speak the truth. Maybe he regrets. Maybe he doesn't. But I don't wonder often. He's no longer the center of my world. A month after Gloria's passing, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from her lawyer. She'd left me something. $25,000. No note. No explanation. Just a legal acknowledgement, a signature, and the check. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to tear it up. But then I realized something else. It wasn't a gift. It was a confession. A small trembling apology in the only language Gloria had ever known, money. I didn't need the money, but I took it. And I donated every cent. To the hospice wing where she'd been treated. In her name. Because I wanted her legacy to be one final contradiction. Let people walk past that plaque donated in memory of Gloria Whitmore and feel comforted not knowing it came from the woman she tried to destroy. Let them be confused by kindness, because that's the power of reclaiming your story. I didn't choose revenge. I chose justice wrapped in grace. I forgave her, yes, but I didn't go back. I forgave Ethan too, but I never replied to another message. I didn't need to scream or confront or parade my success. I simply disappeared from their world, and in that space they left behind, I bloomed. Today I am a woman with keys of her own, a voice of her own, a future that no longer depends on being accepted or tolerated. I cook barefoot in my kitchen. I light lavender candles when I write. I laugh loudly when something is funny. I fall asleep to music instead of muffled arguments. And I never again sit at a table where love must be earned. Let them regret. Let them remember me when they tell their own story, always wondering what I would have said if they'd just said sorry. But my silence now is not defeat. It's power. My name is Lena Whitmore. I live in Salem, Oregon. And I am finally free.